Good morning. Welcome to Cheyenne's Forum. Today is June 13th. Hello, Tom. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. Tom is my dear friend, and he was working in FBI for almost 30 years and was Assistant Director of FBI for 5 years. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Sure, Tom. So we were talking about two cases today, and our title of the program of today is "No One Above the Law?" Question mark. Right. So two cases. One is Hunter Biden, that we know that he was found guilty of making a false statement of purchasing a gun. So lots of media are so happy about that because they said, see, this is a proof of no one above the law. That's one question. Is that really no one above the law? How about this case? It's what is the real deal of this case, Hunter Biden? All right, that's the first case we like to hear from Tom. And second is about Garland, the Department of the Secretary of the Department of Justice. And no, yesterday, I think it's Wednesday, um, Joe Biden's Department of Justice issued a memo declaring that Attorney General um, Garland is protected from a prosecution of the contempt of Congress because Biden used exclusive or executive privilege, something order, special order protect him. So what happened there? Some people just get confused. Is that no one above the law? Another case? So this is two cases we wanted to discuss with you.
Okay.
The first one, Hunter Biden. What do you think about his case?
Well, I think Hunter Biden, the part about him being above the law goes back many years. The investigation by Internal Revenue and the other agencies involved, going back several years, um, had uncovered tremendous evidence of Hunter Biden committing tax fraud, um, being an agent of Ukraine and not declaring himself as an agent of a foreign power, several violations. And at that time, the prosecutor just took his time and let these accusations expire. So
Mhm.
that's known as a statute of limitations. So, in
Mhm.
other words, if you're accused of committing a violation, some violations, there's no statute of limitations. So, if they have evidence 20 years from now that you were a terrorist or committed a murder, they can prosecute. But many violations, tax violations, other white collar violations, they'll have a limit. It might be 5 years, it might be 10 years. And the accusation by several high ranking IRS whistleblowers who worked on the case said that the prosecutor stalled the investigation and stalled bringing the charges until they expired.
Uh,
Now, what's interesting, no one's above the law, right? Well, when they expired, they expired. So
mhm,
now Hunter Biden is charged and prosecuted on this gun violation. Well,
mhm,
we'll see what happens with that. He's convicted. We'll see when he gets sentenced on that. Now,
mhm,
what happens in federal court and in some state courts, like in New York, when a person is convicted of a crime, then all of the records and everything about that person goes to, in some cases, the Department of Probation, but there's some entity that does an investigation on that person. Is he a good person or a bad person? Has he committed other crimes? Has he not committed other crimes? All of those factors are put together, and then that department puts that report together and gives it to the prosecutor. The
mhm,
prosecutor uses that report to decide how severe of a sentence to ask for
mhm,
in the case of the subject. So that's one of the differences here. You see in the Trump case in New York, they want to jail him, they want to do all of these things. In the Hunter Biden case, well, he's not so bad. And we don't, and then and they had made a deal with Hunter Biden's attorneys, the Department of Justice, that basically was going to give him a pass. And the judge threw out that deal about a year ago. And that's when the department was kind of forced to bring a prosecution. Well, by now, the only charges left in the Delaware case was the gun violation, that he lied on the gun application and owned a gun, even though he was an admitted drug addict and drug user, which comes up because he puts that in his book. He puts that on his computer. Everybody can see it. And so it was hard to deny that he was under the influence of drugs most of the time, including, he began dating his brother's widow after the brother died. And so she becomes his girlfriend for a time. And she's basically saying that, Hunter Biden is using crack cocaine every day. He's drinking. He's doing all of these nefarious things, and including owning that gun. And then she puts it in the pouch and throws it in a dumpster that's very close to a school. And then, the authorities find it. I think the Secret Service actually dug it out of the dumpster. I don't recall who recovered it, but it was clear that that's not how you get rid of a gun, by throwing it in the trash near a school.
Right.
But in any event, so Hunter Biden, relatively minor charges, given all of the other accusations. Now, he still has an upcoming trial in Los Angeles scheduled for September on more serious charges. Now, we'll see what happens in that case. But in the interim, the conviction here, the report will go to the judge of the prosecutor's office, how severe of a penalty should he be given? How severe should the prosecutors recommend to the judge in his case? That remains to be seen.
Sure. So it is said that the Democrat like to play a balance, so-called. Say we have a Trump case, and then we have Hunter Biden's case. See, we're fair. So what do you think about this?
Well, they're not fair, but that, let them say it. They keep saying things like that are absurd.
Right.
If it was fair, they would have brought every charge they could possibly have amassed over the last 5 or 10 years against Hunter and prosecuted him for all those violations.
Right.
You notice with Trump, they didn't wait and let things expire. And in the case of Trump, which makes it worse, is he's charged in a state of New York court on federal charges that they just said, okay, now they're going to be state charges. Well, that whole procedure, has yet to be decided. We'll see how far that goes up the appellate courts, but they don't care. In Trump's case, they just wanted a conviction to be able to say, he's a convicted felon. That's it. He can appeal it, and that may take 2-3 years, and he'll be found innocent. Probably. Most legal scholars are saying the conviction will be thrown out. Well, that won't matter because it will be long after the election. And their expectation, the Democrats' expectation, is he'll be found guilty because of the felony convictions. So, that'll remain to be seen, but that's what they're hoping. They don't care if he's not guilty 2 years from now. So what? As long as he's kept from being president, that's their only main objective.
So they really play the law.
Right. Now, what's going to happen, or is happening in the Trump case, is that his attorneys are going to be trying to file various types of writs, WRIT, petitioning the U.S. Supreme Court to take the case and come in and look at the constitutional issues of, number one, the statute of limitations had run out on the Trump case. They just waived that, said, oh, we don't care. So they pass a law that says doesn't apply. Now, in Hunter's case, they don't do that. They say it applies. He can't be charged on all these things that the IRS whistleblowers pointed out. So there's a definite difference in DOJ policy on what they did in Hunter's case compared to Trump. Now, the other thing with Trump, you say, well, that's a New York State case. That's a local case. Well, DOJ gives the prosecutors, the state prosecutors, Alvin Bragg, their number 3 DOJ prosecutor, Coangelo, and hand him over to help the state prosecution and to make federal charges become state charges, make
Mm-hmm.
federal charges become state, not only state charges, state felonies.
Mm-hmm.
They completely changed the posture of the case against Trump,
Mm-hmm.
maximum number of charges they could think up,
Mm-hmm.
hoping for the maximum sentence. They don't care about statute of limitations. They don't care that the federal government, DOJ, had already turned down prosecution of that issue with Trump. That
Mm-hmm.
they, that they had already decided, including Alvin Bragg himself at the state level, had decided not to take that case. Now, all of a sudden, a
Mm-hmm.
few months before the election, oh, we got to take this case. So
Yeah, that's so you're talking about the guy from DOJ. He's the number third people in DOJ come
right.
to help the New York case. Is that against the law or is that allowed to do so?
I don't know technically how he did it. Now, he might have resigned from DOJ and then got hired by the state prosecutor's office. So that, which is possible, you could do that. Now, you would think, why would the number three
Right.
high ranking official of the Department of Justice take
Mhm.
a low level job at the state's attorney's office in New
Absolutely.
York?
Hmm.
Well, they want Trump so bad they don't care. They don't care how they have to do it. So that's what he did. And I'm going to guess that they did it legally. I don't know, but we don't know from a paperwork standpoint, did he officially resign from the Department of Justice and then did he go over? But the Department of Justice has already been helping state prosecutors in these cases if it involves Trump. That includes the state's attorney, Alvin Bragg, district attorney in New York. That includes the case in Fulton, Georgia, with
Hmm.
Fannie Willis and
Hmm.
that whole thing that's still
Right.
not unraveled yet.
Right.
But the bottom line, and you and I have talked about this many times, the
Hmm.
Democrats should have realized that these cases are not clear cut. They have constitutional issues.
Right.
Can a state prosecutor take federal charges and incorporate them into a state charge? Can
Hmm.
a local prosecutor take the statute of limitations? It doesn't count. We're going
Hmm.
to go ahead and use it in Trump's case. They didn't use it in Hunter's case, but they used it in Trump's case. So you have these kind of issues.
Hmm.
And as we've talked about, the state prosecutors and the federal prosecutors all decided to wait on
Hmm.
charges that they could have filed a couple of years ago. They decide to wait till the last minute because they know they'll get a conviction right before the election and Trump won't get elected. And then later in the appeal, they don't care.
Hmm.
If he wins the appeal, so what? He's not in the White House. That's
Right.
their goal. So
Right.
now
Right.
what happens is then you have all of these motions to the Supreme Court
Hmm.
saying, wait a minute, this is a violation of the Constitution. That's a violation of due process, these issues. And the Supreme Court's not going to automatically rule overnight on every single issue. They're
Hmm.
going to study it. It's going to take time. And they may put it, on the back burner, just like you had, the prosecution of Trump in the documents case,
Hmm.
federal case, where the
Hmm.
prosecutor petitions the court for speeding, act right now, act right away. The court says, wait a minute, you
Hmm.
go back, follow the normal process of appeal.
Hmm.
Now,
Hmm.
one of the differences here for Trump could be raising the issue that the presidential election is coming up.
Hmm.
And what happens in a state court, it's not just the state of New York
Hmm.
or Manhattan residents that are going to be affected by the decision of that court. So
Right.
when they obstruct the case or do some tricks with the case, that affects every citizen of the United States that may want to vote for Trump.
Hmm.
And so that becomes a due process issue. Due
Hmm.
process is from the 14th Amendment, one of the other provisions of the 14th Amendment.
Hmm.
Due process says that you can't deny citizens' rights from the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments. So in that case, the Supreme Court could take the case because it has such an impact nationwide. Now,
Hmm.
one of the precedents for having done that was in the George Bush versus Al Gore
Mhm.
in 2000.
Mhm.
And in that case, the Supreme Court was petitioned with a writ saying, wait a minute, stop the counting in different districts in Florida, stop all of this stuff and weigh in because this is already past the date of the election by a couple of weeks.
Mhm.
And in that case, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of George Bush, made him president.
Mhm.
But they're saying that the issue is it's not just up to one or two or three counties in Florida to decide a presidential election. In
Mhm.
this case, where there's allegations of fraud, or you remember the hanging
Mhm.
chits, they had to punch holes in the election form, and some of the holes didn't fall out. And but the Supreme Court said, wait a minute, this affects voters all over the country. This is a huge issue beyond the limited counties that came up in the Florida. So
Mhm.
anyway, there are legal scholars, guys like Mark Levin on
Mhm.
his show, and others that have said that case created the precedent that under due process,
Mhm.
the Supreme Court could get involved because this decision has to be made quicker because of the election, because
Mhm.
of the implications for the rest of the country and the
Mhm.
voters of the rest of the country, that the decision should be made as soon as possible.
Right, right.
Now, that doesn't guarantee the Supreme Court will take the case.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean the Supreme Court will rule in favor of Trump if they do take the case.
Mhm.
But scholars are saying you have to try. You have
Right,
to try to bring this to the attention of the Supreme Court.
right. So the good news is Trump's attorney is doing that, right?
Well, we think so.
Okay, so we'll see. And
Yeah.
the news is that Trump just right. I think right now he's in the Capitol, right? Talk to the Republican.
Yeah, he's in Washington.
Right, right. So we'll see what happened there. And then also we talk about the DOJ, talk about Garland. And then what do you think about his case? And Biden give him a special privilege protection. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think Biden has the authority to give him that kind of protection. What Merrick Garland is accused of is that the Congress has given him a number of petitions where people have violated, not testified or lied under oath when they testified, things like that.
Mhm.
And they're saying that Garland doesn't care. He hasn't brought up any one of those cases against a Democrat, but yet brings up the cases that allowed the Democrats to jail some of Trump's people, like Peter Navarro, and now Steve Bannon is supposed to report to jail. And in
Mhm.
Bannon's, it's for not testifying to the January 6th committee.
Mhm.
And everybody, that knows anything about committees is it wasn't an official committee. So you have this sham committee created by Nancy Pelosi. And
Mhm.
now somehow that committee has the authority that if you didn't do what it said, you're automatically going to go to jail. And that's what's happened in that case. And the courts have upheld it up till now. So
Mhm.
getting a message, my internet's unstable. But
Okay.
anyway, I think that so Merrick Garland has refused to follow those issues. He's refused to provide documents requested by members of Congress, the committees, and all of that. And the latest one is that when Special Prosecutor Huh said that they interviewed President Biden regarding his possession of the classified documents and the various issues in that investigation,
Mhm.
that when they interviewed Biden, that he was so incapable of answering the questions. His memory was so faulty.
Mhm.
His intelligence level, everything, his cognitive abilities were so weak, he shouldn't be prosecuted. Well, the problem with that is he's the president of the United States. If
Right.
he can't testify or be
Mhm.
interviewed intelligently, how's he going to run the country with
Mhm.
with all of the threats of nuclear warfare going on right now in Europe and other issues around the world with not just the Russians but the Chinese? Are they going to invade Taiwan? All of these issues that the president always has to deal with, or at least now, especially now, dealing with,
Mhm.
that if you have somebody that's incapable, has such terrible cognitive abilities that
Mhm.
you don't want to prosecute him, how can he run the country?
Right.
Which raises the issue of the 25th Amendment. If you have a president that's not capable, members of his cabinet can invoke the 25th Amendment to take him out. Now,
Hmm.
right now, they don't want to do that because the acknowledgement by most Democrats and many other members of Congress is, as cognitively impaired as Joe Biden is, Kamala Harris is even dumber. So they don't want her to be president.
Hmm.
So they don't want to impeach or have Biden leave the office too soon and make her president. And
Hmm.
what that would also make her an incumbent
Hmm.
come November. So
Hmm.
that's why I think Democrats and Republicans both are basically keeping their fingers crossed that Joe Biden can at least make it past the election. If he wants to say, I'm not going to run, I won't be a candidate again, that's fine. But he's still the president until next January.
Hmm.
So that's what's at play here, is that he picked someone that no one wants to be president. And no one wants her to be an incumbent because now it'll look like racism and they're trying to keep her out and
Hmm.
all of that. So they're basically going along with Biden, as weak as he is
Hmm.
cognitively, staying in as long as possible. Now, one of the interesting things about that is that, Biden had agreed to the debate with Trump.
Right. Mm. Hello, Tom. Okay, I think we have a little bit issue, uh, the internet issue. So let's wait for a few minutes. I think he'll be back. Oh, hello, Tom.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, so you're frozen for about 10 seconds.
Yeah, no, and I heard you complete, no problem during that whole time.
Huh.
So
Okay, so let's continue. Keep continue. So, do you think they will change the person if Biden cannot make it? It seems like he's like declare every day his situation is so bad. You're talking about he's agree with Trump to debate. Can he really do that? I don't know if he can make it.
well,
Or
there are many insiders in the White House that said that Joe Biden was able to give his great performance at the State of the Union address a couple of months ago
Mhm.
because they put all kinds of drugs in it. That they give him amphetamines and other drugs that pumps him up. Uh, what they've said is that when he gets like that, he also becomes angrier and more aggressive and all of that. But they said that during the State of the Union, he did make it through the whole speech intact, basically. So that's the theory, is that by having the debate and agreeing to the debate, that they think that they can probably prepare Biden enough that he can perform on the debate stage. Now, we'll see. And when they say prepare him, I don't think they mean with the issues or cognitive, ability, or here's what we should do on trade with China, or here's what we should do in Europe or with Russia or all of that. I don't think that's what they really mean. What they really mean is get him physically able,
Mhm.
like a prize
Mhm.
fighter in a boxing match, get him pumped up with drugs that he can perform. And then what happens after, an hour after the debate, nobody cares.
Mhm.
Now,
Mhm.
the other question that I would have when people are accusing insiders or doctors close to the White House or his wife or others of using, illegal substances, let's say, to inject Biden's so that he has a better ability to be awake and to be strong and perform, that's
Mhm.
pretty dangerous for somebody like him, because that could result in being fatal. How
Yeah.
do they know to give him enough drugs, but not too much that he drops dead during the middle of the debate? They don't
Mhm.
know. We don't know. So those are issues to see that, that Joe Biden, will he be capable? And then they're imposing, a number of other rules about no audience, and the moderators can cut the microphones off and do different things. It won't be the usual format of a presidential debate or a vice president debate like we've had in the past. But
Mm-hmm.
that'll remain to be seen how that comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, people in the Trump campaign are saying, you know, they should issue a drug test to
Yeah.
to Biden and to Trump both. Do a drug test right before the debate
Mm-hmm.
and find out, like you do with racehorses. You know, if you win the Kentucky Derby,
Mm-hmm.
your horse gets a drug test.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So any of the more important races, let's say, they
Mm-hmm.
give drug tests to the animals.
So day by day, the government, the Biden's administration, it seems like a joke to the whole world. How can you have a president of United States behave like this? And then I don't, nobody has the answer. So this is the play. Then how can they continue to play on the
Well, they don't
stage?
admit to it. If you looked over this past weekend, Gavin Newsom,
Mm-hmm.
who has made himself basically the number one candidate to replace Biden, he gives an interview, and the anchor asking him these questions on the show.
Mm-hmm.
How can you support him in this? Oh, he's the greatest president. He's made so many great policies. He's just terrific. It's all a lie. What great president? What great policies? What great things has he done? Economy, the state of our military, the state of you name it.
Yeah, yeah.
uh, he has not been and all of the polls and many of the pollsters and pundits, many are saying that
Mm-hmm.
he's the worst president in our lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Not just he's not as good. And a matter of fact, they joke that now President Carter is happy because he's no longer the worst president. He's
Much
second
better.
to the worst. Joe Biden's worse than Carter.
Mm-hmm.
So, those are serious issues. And you notice the Democrats, they just stick together. They just, you know, look at what they did. One question you haven't asked yet, but to show the arrogance of the Democratic Party, the
Mm-hmm.
Constitution lays out the measures of how a president, vice president, or cabinet officer or federal judge can be removed from office through the impeachment process.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the House of Representatives a couple of weeks ago pass articles, and articles of impeachment are like an indictment in a criminal trial.
Mm-hmm.
The articles of impeachment are a formal accusation that
Mm-hmm.
the person that they've brought the articles against committed violations of the Constitution or of laws,
Mm-hmm.
high crimes and misdemeanors, various elements. And then that person, when accused under the articles, that paperwork goes to the US Senate.
Mm-hmm.
Senate then becomes the jury.
Mm-hmm.
And usually, like if it's the president, like in Trump's case, member of the Supreme Court or the chief judge of the Supreme Court goes to the Senate chamber and presides over the trial.
Mm-hmm.
The 100 senators are now the jury.
Right.
In order for the impeachment to be a conviction, it takes 67 senators, 2/3 of the US Senate, to say guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Now, right now, we have a very even Senate. Democrats ahead by 1 or 2 senators.
Mm-hmm.
Schumer, senator from New York, is basically the leader of the Senate right now, leader of the Democratic Party that has the most members, basically, in charge of the Senate. Schumer gets the articles of impeachment from the House last week. Says, no, we're not going to hear it. I saw that, I go, what? And the question there is, now you have only 4 or 5 months till the election. So they just let that go. I think the Republicans are probably going to let it go and figure by the time they appeal that to the Supreme Court and
Mm-hmm.
say, does he have, there's nowhere in the provision that says that the leader of the Democratic Party or the leader of the ruling party in the Senate
Mm-hmm.
can throw away the articles of impeachment without even setting a court date or without even having a vote. He could have assigned it to the Senate and said, okay, now we're going to vote. Do you want to throw these charges out? Yeah, then they're out. They didn't even do that. Schumer took it on himself to do it. Is that constitutional? We don't know. Another issue. How many of these issues can the Supreme Court take up in the matter of a few days for a few weeks. We don't know.
So the situation right now we are facing is the Democrats is not a normal party now. They against the law. They are the lawmaker and then they're against the law. So I think this is the situation that in the street of the United States I never faced before.
I know, but it doesn't seem to matter for many of the Democratic voters out there, traditional Democrats. It just seems like whatever they do is fine in many cases because they don't like Trump so much. So anything goes to keep Trump from being president. So I
Mhm.
think that that's part of the problem. Now you
Sure.
mentioned earlier about Merrick Garland now
Right.
being held in contempt of court.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the main issue with Garland is Congress. They hold these hearings. People are sworn in to tell the truth, and time after time, Democrats have taken the witness stand and lied.
Right.
And in many cases, the Democrats have the proof. They have
Mm-hmm.
documents from their investigation. They have other testimony
Mm-hmm.
that makes it clear that the subject may have lied. They've referred those
Mm-hmm.
to Department of Justice. They haven't prosecuted any of them.
Mm-hmm.
However, they don't. The DOJ does not hesitate to go after Peter Navarro or Rogers or Steve Bannon or any of these Democrats or I mean of Republicans that
Mm-hmm.
they think should be prosecuted and then put them in jail. Peter Navarro's in jail. Bannon is supposed to report to prison July 1.
Mm-hmm.
So you have that time after time. Now, in the case of the Attorney General himself, this comes the most recent, besides
Mm-hmm.
not honoring all of the other subpoenas, but the
Mm-hmm.
most recent thing is Special Prosecutor her saying that Biden, they did an oral interview with Joe Biden
Mm-hmm.
and recorded it. And as a result of that interview, concluded that he has no cognitive capability of standing a fair trial. Therefore, they don't want to prosecute him. They don't want to recommend prosecution. That Biden is getting a pass because he's too weak, memory is poor, all of that. And so now the Republicans in Congress have said, we would like a copy of that audio recording of the interview.
Right.
We want to hear that. The public should know how that interview went
Sure.
because based on the interview, the prosecutor is making the judgment he
Mm-hmm.
can't stand trial.
Mm-hmm.
So Garland says, no, no, I'm not going to give it to you, period. And that's basically right now what the issue is that they've held Garland in contempt. Now,
Mm-hmm.
what happens is that's referred to the Department of Justice. What do you
Yeah.
think they're going to do? Nothing. Another case where that happened was when Obama was president.
Mm-hmm.
The Basically there was a case where Eric Holder, the Department of Justice, the Attorney General, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
said that basically that they had given approval to an undercover operation where weapons were sold to Mexican cartels, and this was supposed to be where ATF was going to follow these weapons and then be able to prosecute cartel members for possession of these weapons that they shouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
And then it backfired because the cartel, during an arrest incident, they killed a U.S. agent. And so anyway, during the congressional hearings, Congress wants to see and hear all of the material presented to Eric Holder, which
Mm-hmm.
caused him to rule in favor of doing the operation, the undercover operation.
Mm-hmm.
And he refused. Nope, not going to give you anything. They held him in contempt. What
Mm-hmm.
happened to him? Nothing. Nothing. So so
So,
that's the other side of that is who's above the law, Democrats or Republicans.
mm-hmm.
So you
Mm-hmm.
have two situations where a Democratic attorney general, while Democrats have the majority in the Senate, basically fails to comply with a subpoena or other official requests from Congress. No, I'm not giving it to you. I don't care what you do.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
held him in contempt. Oh, that's so terrible. Nothing. Nothing happened.
Yeah. So another issue is about Nancy Pelosi. We'll talk about Democrats. She actually lied about on what she's done during the 2021 when the January 6th things happened. She said, I'll take responsibility to not having the National Guard here. And right now, the little clip of the video is just go public, and everybody heard she said, I take the responsibility of that, meaning it's not Trump's fault. And then Nancy Pelosi went to, I think, MSNBC and said, no, 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 it's still Trump's fault. So everybody heard that. She said she will take herself, will take the responsibility. And then in front of everyone, she said, no, Trump will take the responsibility. These people are lying like how could they do that? And how could we just let her go? Let these people go. These people are against the law by themselves. The behave of what they're doing to the public, to the country. They are the enemy. So what can we do? We cannot just let them go like
Well,
this.
what are you going to do? You know, her district in San Francisco reelects her over and over and over. So they allow it. They allow her to get away with it. Department of Justice isn't going to prosecute her for lying. And you have the issue, another constitutional issue, that committee, the J6 committee that she organized, was not legal
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
committees, congressional special committees in Congress, are supposed to be set up to be balanced between the parties.
Mhm.
And the Republican Party, if they're in the minority, gets the ability to appoint or select its
Mhm.
members that will sit on the committee.
Mhm.
So the Republicans submitted who they wanted, and she
Mhm.
threw it out. No, 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 no. I'll pick them. So she picks Liz Cheney, who voted to impeach Trump twice, hates Trump. She
Mhm.
picked Kissinger, a Congress from Illinois,
Mhm.
who also voted to impeach Trump.
Mhm.
That's her picks. She
Mhm.
throws out other people, whether it's Jim Jordan or other members of Congress
Mhm.
that are Republican members who
Mhm.
Trump, it doesn't matter. But
Mhm.
both parties are supposed to be able to select who
Mhm.
they want on the committee. She threw that out. Secondly,
Mhm.
if it's an official committee
Mhm.
by federal law, any organization, government agency, committee of Congress, any official committee, official
Mhm.
procedures has to maintain its records. Now, that committee conducted a number of closed door interviews, and
Mhm.
those interviews favored Trump, that
Mhm.
he didn't order people to go to the Capitol and destroy things or do this or do that. And basically, when the Republicans in Congress subpoena those records from the committee, oh, we don't know where they went. We can't find them. They're destroyed or they're lost or something. That's not
Mhm.
allowed.
Mhm.
That's like Hillary Clinton destroying her email machines and Blackberries and everything back, in 2015, 2016.
Mhm.
So you have this committee that's unlawful in the first place. And
Mhm.
then when it's pretending to be an official committee, do
Right.
these things that are violations of law.
Right.
And then the answer is who's going to prosecute? DOJ? No. So they get away with that. And that's what we have now. And then you have people that testified and lied. Like if you remember the one person, the one woman
Mhm.
that was a White House aide or something, that testified that
Yes.
when the
Yes.
president was en route to the Capitol building, he
Mhm.
leaned over, grabbed the steering wheel, and was trying to make them, do something else. And the head of the detail, the driver from the Secret Service, they all testified that's not true. None of that happened. Plus,
Mhm.
the way that limousine, you
Mhm.
can't reach from the back seat to the steering wheel to try to do anything. That was her testimony.
But
Flat out lie.
law. She's against the law, right?
Yeah.
She's supposed to be in the jail.
Yeah.
If
What
she
happened to her? She said all that under oath. It was a complete lie.
Mhm.
So you just have this over and over and over again. I remember day one when the committee started, they wanted to show the speech that Trump had given. There was a rally that went from the Capitol all the way, you know,
Mm-hmm.
16 blocks to the White House.
Mm-hmm.
So in front of the White House, Trump is speaking. And during his speech, he's talking about, what happened with the Electoral College vote and all of these issues that are going to be part of the protests at the
Mm-hmm.
Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of his speech, he said, now let's go forward and peacefully
Mm-hmm.
protest at the
Right.
Capitol. When the J6 committee played his speech at the beginning of the committee to all of the US, they cut off that part. They cut off the peacefully protest part that
Mm-hmm.
Trump had said and made it look like Trump said, go to the Capitol and start a riot. Well, he didn't. But that's how unfair that committee was, trying to make false accusations, not just against Trump, but all the Trump supporters that went to the Capitol to protest.
Right. Right.
So,
So, you mentioned, thank you so much for mentioning the whole thing about Jason's committee. And then you mentioned that Nancy Pelosi threw out the name that Republic gave to her and said, no, 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 I'll pick up the member from your party. Is
right.
that allowed? Is that allowed? Can she, as a
No,
speaker?
she cannot. She cannot.
Okay,
So all of these committees, you have basic sitting committees in the House, in the Senate.
right.
When the election is over, the party that has the majority, let's say
Mhm,
in the House of Representatives,
mhm.
they get to pick the Speaker of the House. Well, everybody gets to pick, but usually it ends up the majority party. You remember when McCarthy was challenged,
Right,
that Joaquin Jeff, that the Democrat almost got elected as Speaker
right,
of
right.
the House, which is possible. But
Mhm,
meantime, you have you have each committee, whether
mhm,
it's the military committees or the appropriations committees, whatever they are,
mhm.
each committee, the chairman is from the party that's the majority party. They're all
Right.
going to be Republicans. They're all going
Mhm,
to be selected by, the new Speaker of the House. Now,
mhm,
those are powerful positions. The Speaker of the House gets to decide what investigations, what subpoenas they can issue, what the topics are, what laws can be proposed to the sitting members of the House of Representatives.
mhm,
So in that particular case, that's what you have. These Republican now. The first two, when Pelosi was Speaker of the House, none of these committees were allowed to investigate. So all of
mhm,
these investigations that you have about weaponizing DOJ or the illegal activity of the Bidens making millions of dollars improperly from Ukraine, China, Romania, all of these countries, all of that comes up because in the last 2 years, because the Republicans finally had the chairman of these committees to do it, to issue the documents, to issue subpoenas. And so the whole time Pelosi was in, none of this happens. She covers up for the Democratic Party. She prevents any of these subpoenas from going out. So the Speaker of the House is a tremendously powerful position to
mhm,
determine what hearings are held and what subpoenas are going to be issued to support those hearings, and then what recommendations will be made to the entire House of Representatives, what laws will be recommended to the House to
mhm,
pass from the House of Representatives. And so that's a huge issue. So
mhm.
now the House is barely, a Republican majority. Come November, we'll see another huge issue. If the Republicans lose having the majority, there'll be new elections for the speaker, and the the party that wins the most votes nationwide will be controlling the committees. So
Mhm.
they will have the chairmanship of every committee, and that's extremely important.
Mhm. Well, so it looks to me, Americans like a person, a body. So we have two systems, the Democrats and not two systems, two parties. They're try to work together, and they have sometimes they have different view of certain things, which is very normal. And then we just try to help the two parties or try work together to help the country or to help the body get more and more healthier, which is the designers designer's purpose. And right now, you see the other party, like Democrats, are trying to eat the whole body.
Yeah,
You
you
know,
see that. And you're right. Theoretically, the
right,
parties or everybody involved, congressional committees, everything, they should be trying to work together.
right.
But what you see is on the part of the Democrats, this is my opinion,
Hmm.
the Democratic Party has become a Marxist organization, not left, not progressive,
No,
Marxist.
you're
So
right.
you see all of the activities that they're doing following the Marxist agenda set forth by Karl Marx in the middle of the 19th century,
Hmm.
150 years ago.
Hmm.
Basically, the playbook is, well, we got to destroy the family, number one. We've
Hmm.
got to we've got to destroy the church, religion,
Hmm.
so that people are dependent on the government, not worshiping, someone else, God, or their version of a supreme being.
Hmm.
All of these different things down the line, and you look at where they look at this. They want children to be raised by the state, not by their parents. So
Hmm.
they pass and support all of these laws that say parents have no right to determine whether their children are put through sexual gender surgeries.
Hmm.
That's a decision of the state. So when the teachers of a school district say, we want the ability, if that child, 6 years old, expresses a desire to change sexes, we want the ability to make those arrangements without even telling the parents.
Hmm.
That's 100% Marxist.
You know
How
what?
many Democrats support that?
Yeah, Tom, I'm sorry. I have to say something. I came from China, and this is, of course, a communist party. And even in China, nobody do that. Like the sex, like a gender issue, like right now we see in the United States, they change the gender. Don't tell parents. No. So China is the biggest. Right now, it's the biggest communist party. We never do that. So people right now, I see some Marxism are even crazier than the traditional Marxism.
Right.
Is that why? Why?
Well,
It's crazy.
China, of course, has each country that followed Marxism had its own version. Whether it was the Soviet Union had their version,
Mhm,
China, North Korea,
mhm.
Cuba,
Right.
now Venezuela. So you have variations of it.
Hmm.
Now, China has a separate issue that going back to Mao, where
Hmm.
he issued the first one child policy, then
That's.
two child policy, and now China, as a result of that, is facing dramatic reduction in the population
Hmm.
predicted over the next 30 or 40 years, the next generation. So
Hmm.
now you're not going to have enough productive people,
Right.
now 30, 40 years later, they're not
Hmm.
going to be in a position to support their parents
Hmm.
or the elderly or that whole issue in the Chinese government. So now China has issued new rules, have three children.
Right.
And the
Hmm.
young women are basically saying, no, we don't want to.
Right.
You know, we don't want to have all these kids. What are we going to do? We want to work. We have careers. We have other issues. And
Hmm.
that's true in many countries, the US included,
Right.
Japan as bad as China, of
Hmm.
not having enough young
Right.
people, but young women particularly, want to have children.
Hmm.
In many cases, they don't even want to get married. So that's affecting these countries demographically.
Hmm.
The US doesn't have quite as much of that, but
Hmm.
the other countries do. And the
Hmm.
US didn't prohibit, but the policies can be put in place that make it unlikely that you would want to have a child.
Hmm.
So right now, even in the US, you have young couples, if they get basically postponing getting married, so they
Hmm.
might be 30 years old instead of 22.
Hmm.
And then they're looking at when can they buy their first house. Some of
Hmm.
them are saying, with the economy the way it is and interest rates, never, or at
Yeah.
least not now, at least not for a long time. So basically, many of the things that would support a young family
Hmm.
and that family then having children
Hmm.
and adding to the population of your country,
Hmm.
many of those mechanisms are not working too well in
Right.
any of the developed countries.
Right. Right.
Now,
Right.
where it is working well is they look at Middle Eastern or African countries where there's no problem. They'll have 10 kids, no
Mm-hmm.
problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll come to the US and have that many kids
Mm-hmm.
and change the demographics of this country.
Mm-hmm.
So these are issues that we're not even getting that far down the road to get to these issues.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that the Marxism have different form, different way,
Absolutely. Right.
yeah. So in America, the way is the gender issue is a huge issue, LGBTQ. That's the Marxism performed in the States.
Right.
So do we have enough tool to or weapon to against the Marxism in our country? Do you have confidence that we can fight the Marxism and get win at the end?
During the Trump administration, he repeatedly said, this country will never go socialist.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's false. We are going socialist.
Mm-hmm.
So he was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody anticipated that the Biden administration coming in, they thought he'd be more status quo over the years. And it turns out, like a puppet on the strings, he's
Mm-hmm.
controlled. We don't know who, whether it's Obama or people from the Obama administration or oligarchs in the US, the big donors from the big corporations. We don't know exactly who's pulling every string, but
Mm-hmm.
it's clear that Biden's policies are not supporting the United States in the long run. They're
No.
dangerous policies. They're
Mm-hmm.
hurting the country economically. And
Mm-hmm.
then you can go right to the policy of the open border. That's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely critical. And what's interesting is that what surprises me is that people in this country even vote against their best interests. So if you look at Hispanics and Blacks and some of the lower level uh, economic people on the economic ladder, that they vote for Biden. And then Biden has this open border policy, brings in all these migrants that are going to take their jobs for less money.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. They still vote Democrat. Oh, that's all right. And it's like, how can so many million people vote against their own interests? I don't know. How do they do that? How do they brainwash members of the Democratic Party or the population at large, especially in these big cities that
Mm-hmm.
are in such bad shape under Democratic rule? And yet, what's going to happen there?
Mm-hmm.
Can Trump overrule that and win the majority in places like New York City or Chicago or Philadelphia or those states?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not. We're
So
saying, oh, they're in play. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. Now, you remember 4 years ago, there was going to be a big red wave. Well, it didn't happen. And you're hearing that now. Oh, this conservative push, the support of, MAGA, the support of Trump and all of that.
mm-hmm.
Well, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
maybe. And you're hearing the opposite side. Biden can't possibly get enough votes
Mm-hmm.
to be reelected. The blacks are turning on him. Hispanics are turning. All of these groups are turning.
Right.
Well, on the other hand, it sure seems like all the Democrats in Congress and all the other Democratic authorities, the city mayors, the city prosecutors, all of that, they're in lockstep. The Democrats are, to me, are like a herd of rats. They all
Mm-hmm.
go along with however stupid the policy is, however dangerous it is to the public. No, that doesn't matter. They're going to do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, as much as people think that Trump is going to overwhelmingly, win the presidency back, I don't think so. I don't think he's going to, I'm not saying he's going to lose, but I'm saying it's not going to be a landslide
Mm-hmm.
like people predicted 4 years ago, big red wave. I don't think it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Because so many people are still with the Democrats, even Democrats not even do anything good.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what do you think about the Europe situation right now? You see the big wave of
Yeah.
the right side. They said right side, but to me it's just normal people. They come out and they vote against the left wing. So what do you
That's interesting you use that phrase because that's what you hear in the European and our media. That
Uh-huh.
the people in Europe that are saying we no longer want policies from the World Economic Forum ruining our agriculture or
Mm-hmm.
all of these other policies. So they're going to run the woman that ran Le Pen running against Macron in France.
Mm-hmm.
They don't they don't refer to them as conservatives. They
Mm-hmm.
don't refer to them as a little bit right,
Right.
far right wing extreme
That's the
right
thing.
wing radicals.
Mm-hmm.
Well, is the whole continent of Europe radical?
Mm-hmm.
No,
Mm-hmm. That's their narrative.
exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
That is a good news to us. So just normal people are waking up and just say no to this Marxism agenda. So
Right.
we'll see what's going to happen here in the States pretty soon. Six more, no, not six, not even 5 more months.
Yeah.
So
We'll see. We'll
yeah,
see.
yeah, definitely. And we have some people here are just saying thank you so much for Tom to come out and telling the truth, and then really appreciate it. Never give up. And yeah, and then some one of the audience said it's he said Biden is like American Xi Jinping or Xi Jinping in America because I guess what he's saying is the policy from Xi Jinping is really hurt China, and the policy of Biden is really hurt America. I think he just tried to compare these two leaders right now. Um, but
And also, you could throw, if you have a Canadian audience, Trudeau in Canada has
right.
openly said how much he admires Xi Jinping and,
Hmm.
he would like, so he's a Marxist as well.
Hmm.
And, are Canadians waking up to that yet? Or is that whole country going to become Marxist? I don't know. Another issue. I don't know.
Hmm. Seems like you're not very positive for people realize that how dangerous we're right now and
Yeah,
what.
I think
Go
that's true.
ahead.
That's true. I'm very, I'm cautiously optimistic,
Okay. All right.
but we'll see. I have people that I've seen on YouTube channels basically saying if Trump doesn't get elected, some of the states are going to secede from the union, quit the United States, like we had the southern states did before this to start the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the problem is that those states, people that advocated leaving the Union and becoming part of the Confederate States of America,
Hmm.
those people could not call each other, they didn't have phones, but they could see each other, they could send letters to each other, they had all that. The government didn't have this massive operation to figure out what they're doing or to track them or gather evidence against them like we have now. So I've said to people, if you're in Texas or Idaho or Utah or one of these states and you don't like the way the elections turn out, how are you going to organize to leave the United States? How do you contact your friends? Well, that'll be monitored by the FBI and NSA. How do you meet in person? They'll be surveilled and they'll put undercover agents in your group. How do you do all of the preparation, let's say, or gather petitions or any of that to get people in your state to rise up against and advocate against the United States, to
Hmm.
advocate against, to leave the United States? You're not going to get away with it. You're going to, that's what the US government now for several years has been training the people during COVID, the COVID vaccines and all of that. The January 6th defendants just writing to each other, going to prison for 10 years. They're basically telling the people if you're thinking about protesting or going against the government or leaving the government, you better forget about it. We're going to crush you.
Hmm.
You won't be able to do it. And
That's.
we've seen now where that's happened.
Hmm.
Don't don't argue. The COVID vaccine, another one. Even at the extent to the extent that it weakened the U.S. military, too bad. If you
Hmm.
didn't get the vaccines, you're out.
Mm-hmm.
get lost.
Mm-hmm.
And if you protest that, we'll punish you. We'll come after you. We'll censor you. Uh, and now they've got this new term of information terrorism. So if you go against what the regime is saying, you're a terrorist.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to your First Amendment rights to be able to have free speech,
Mm-hmm.
freedom of assembly,
Mm-hmm.
freedom of religion, any of that? The
Mm-hmm.
US government is trying to crush that at every level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, we can see that very clearly through the years. So the last question to us, to everyone is, that's your choice. You follow them or you don't follow them. You give up or you don't give up of your rights.
Well,
So,
right now, if you don't give up your rights, you're liable to end up being arrested, being prosecuted. For the average American, we hear the numbers that 70 or 80% of the population live paycheck to paycheck. If
mhm,
that's the case and the government comes after you because you're protesting in front of an abortion clinic or you go to one of these meetings where it's being advocated to leave the union, any of those things, if the government comes after you, where are you going to get the funding to hire lawyers to stay out of jail? And that's what we saw and continue to see with January 6th defendants. The
mhm,
government just overwhelmed them and
mhm,
said, if you'll plead to a lesser, lower offense, we'll let you off easy. Then they plead to it and they get 10 years in prison. So
mhm,
we have a number of people basically you're going to be bankrupt if you try to defend yourself or you just go along.
mhm, mhm. That's right. They have different form to hold you and push you, agree with them or just follow them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a battle. This is a war to everyone. Well,
I
thank you
agree.
so
I
much,
agree.
Tom. Yeah, to stand with us in this. I think it's the most difficult time during the human history. It's not only in the United States, because if we fall, I think the whole world is fall. But we'll fight, just like President Trump said, we'll never surround, never give up.
Well, so far he hasn't, but there could be many others that will.
Yeah,
If they're facing financial ruin or
right,
jail,
right.
they may just say, I can't fight the whole government.
Right, right. That's their choice. I understand because you have to live your life. So we'll see in this difficult time.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for spending time and bear with me for being late to give us your
Oh,
in.
that's no problem. That's
Yeah,
fine.
sure, for your insight of the cases of the situation we are facing right now. So, once again, this election, the coming election, is the most important one in our life. So we need to get involved and vote, and not only we vote, we try to convince other people to vote. And this is for ourselves and for our next generation and generation after generations. So please do something together. Thank you so much, Tom,
Thank,
again.
thank you, Shane. Appreciate
Sure.
it.
Yeah, and I'll do the Chinese version later today or tomorrow. And again, I really appreciate it. I'll see
Okay.
you next week.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Mhm.